Welcome to Cosmic Conversations, the podcast where spirituality meets real life. I'm Siobhan, your host, aka the Cosmic Coach, and this is a space where we are going to explore the layers of what make us truly who we are. There's going to be a series of solo episodes along with some incredible guests, a space where we can truly discuss the universe within us all. So for today's episode, we are talking about emotions, how to manage your emotions and how to just navigate a bad day. Because if you're listening to this episode, you are human, you have emotions. Maybe you're not a human, but you have emotions and you've definitely felt at different stages of your life, a different array of emotions. And, you know, through my work as like a life coach and my own healing journey, I have felt that so often I have fallen into these traps of where my emotions have been controlling not only the narrative that I tell myself, but my perspective on things, how I, interact with people. And then in turn, I end up just bringing more of what I don't want into my life because I'm letting this emotion rule me. And so if you have ever felt at a certain stage in your life that maybe you have been ruled by an emotion, or you're not sure how to process an emotion, or you're not even really sure what emotions you're feeling, then stick around because maybe you'll enjoy this one. So I suppose, like, just to break down what an emotion actually is, and maybe I should start actually with why I'm so passionate about this episode. So I was sitting down, yesterday, and I was like, what am I going to record? And emotions just kept popping in. You guys know I'm a spiritual gal, okay? I like to ask my angels, what is important for me to talk about right now? I had a different episode planned for today, but emotions just kept coming in. And I am very much so someone who is ruled by my emotions. Like, I think it's a Gemini thing, an air sign thing, but it's also a human thing. But I'm very much like, if I feel something, I'm wearing it on my face. I can't really disguise that. Some people are very good at having their poker face and you don't really know what's going on. My brother's kind of one of those people. You never really know what's going on inside their head. But I'm kind of one of those people that I wear my emotions to the point where, if I'm feeling angry or if I'm feeling rage or frustration or, that kind of pissed off emotion, I'm the person that's like, slamming the drawer and, can't open this and, why isn't this working? Like getting really frustrated with like inanimate objects that are probably like, what in the world? But that's me. And that's how those kind of like more, would you say passionate emotions like come out through me. And so I have had to learn, through the years with counseling and then learning how to become a life coach. I've had to receive coaching myself before I become a life coach. And through that journey, I learned how it was kind of like an aha moment because I was like, oh my God, like this is not actually, not that it's not me, but it's like this emotion is ruling me right now. And why does it have so much power over me? And so like in this episode, I just want to like talk about how I learned to control my emotions and not let them control me, and also why they might be showing up and what it is that they really need. What is it that they're seeking in that moment? And so like when you think about emotions, okay, we think like happy, sad, anger, joy. There's also like contentment, frustration, jealousy, rage. I think I mentioned already. What else is there? Passion, loneliness. I'm going to say love as well. These are all different emotions. And what an emotion is it's energy in motion. When I learned that, I was like, it was like the penny dropped. Emotions are energy in motion. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. This is something that we know. Science tells us this. So when we think about emotions, okay, just to get a little bit like into what actually happens. So when something happens to us in life, could be an experience or a trigger or something happens, our brain takes that, it processes whatever's happening and it drops the emotion down into our body. This is something I only actually came across the other day. So the brain drops the emotion down into the body. The brain doesn't actually hold your emotions. Your emotions aren't in your head. They're in your body. what happens is that emotion is dropped into your body. It starts to come up. Maybe you cry. Maybe you are, angry. You're frustrated, whatever is coming out. Maybe you're excited, you're happy, you're singing, you're dancing, you're in love, whatever it might be, you're expressing it. However, the body keeps the score. So what happens is if we don't express that emotion, energy cannot be created or destroyed. The energy stays in our body. So the energy of that emotion is still within your body. So if we go back to when we were kids, okay? And I'm sure everyone's aware of a toddler meltdown, okay? I have a 2.5-year-old. I am very aware of toddler meltdowns and the frustration and the just everything that they go through in the space of a few seconds, because they can't have another piece of chocolate or whatever it is. And my programming, okay, when I became a mother, and this is to do with my own upbringing, was to make a stop. Okay, I need to make this meltdown stop. I need to make this outburst stop. I need to make this tantrum stop. And I have been slowly unlearning that because, in my own research through gentle parenting and a lot of what Gabor Mate would talk about, and even Joe Dispenza, is that emotion is looking for, it's a need that's not being met. And if you think about we often say, if let's just say a kid's having a meltdown and we say they're acting out. They're acting out, and that's so true. They are acting out, but they're acting out something that they can't communicate themselves. So they can't bring themselves to say the words of, I'm feeling rejected, or I'm feeling disconnected from you, or I'm, no is the hardest word in the world to say to a toddler. And so they're feeling all of these emotions. They're not sure how to express it. They just know that the brain has dumped into the body. It's coming up. They're acting it out. And all of a sudden, we kind of go into this mode of I need to make this stop. When in actual fact, we don't need to make it stop. We just need to help them process and work through it. So that's why it is our job, as parents, if anyone is a parent or anyone that works with children, it's our responsibility as the adults to help them emotionally regulate and to regulate their nervous system, because they're still so young, they can't do that yet. And so, sitting with them, I've had to learn to literally sit with my toddler. And I was only thinking about this earlier as I was driving home, about what I do when my toddler's having a meltdown. I'm not going to put my hands up and say I'm a perfect parent. I'm not a perfect parent. And I have days where I'm oh my God, just please stop crying. But it's more so how would you say? It's the aftermath of that. It's okay, I'm sorry. I'm kind of, I can't remember think of the word, but it's the picking up the pieces after that. And that's the most important to me. So it's not about being perfect. It's just about being responsible and taking accountability. But I find 9 times out of 10, if my toddler is having an absolute meltdown, I just hug him. I just pick him up and I'm it's okay, just give mommy a hug, and take deep breaths, okay? Deep breaths, taking hug. And I swear to God, within seconds, he's come back down to earth, and then I can communicate with him. No, you can't do this. It's not safe. Or no, you can't until after dinner, or whatever it might be. And that really has shown me oh my God, in that moment, that emotion just needs help regulating. But what happens is, and a lot of us may be listening as kids, we're told no, stop acting out. Stop. If you don't stop now, I'm going to take all your toys off. If you don't stop, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk away and I'm going to leave you. We're told, we're going to be abandoned. You're going to be rejected. You're going to be left isolated on your own, and it's leaving. It brings up all these things of oh my God, if I'm having this big emotion, I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be accepted. I'm going to be abandoned. No one's going to look after me. And by the way, I'm not playing the blame game here with the parents either. All of our parents are just doing the best they can. And it's not we're given this rule book, okay? We're not really told how to do this unless we go and look for this information ourselves. So this is just something that our parents, they didn't know. This is how they were brought up, and maybe their parents' parents and parents' parents. And so everyone is doing the best they can, and we're just doing what we know. And so through that, we're kind of teaching not only, the child with their nervous system, okay, this big emotion means that I'm unlovable. If I'm sad, it means that I'm weak. If I'm angry, it means that I'm bold. If I am too excited, it means that I need to quieten down. I need to calm down. So all of these little things, while our brain is still forming, I think 0 to 7 is the most formative years for children, is going into our subconscious, and they're becoming beliefs. And what happens is then when we grow into this big, wonderful adult, we still have that same subconscious, those same belief systems. So, for example, if we feel sad, and it's particularly men, I know it's a big thing with men, men don't cry. I do think we are slowly moving away from that, but still to this day, you see it a lot. Like, it's the man has to be strong and the man doesn't cry. So maybe you're a man that's listening now, you might feel like you have this kind of thing in your subconscious of if you were to cry, it's a weakness. And so what happens is we suppress it. We don't cry. We don't get upset. And one thing that I will say, and I will die on this hill, is that what happens is when we suppress sadness is we get angry. And I know this firsthand myself. Like, I know if I'm angry about something, or if I'm, being like snappy with my partner, or if I'm angry at someone, I know deep down it's a sadness. It's a sadness that's in there, and it's like, angry is sad's bodyguard. And that's what I always say. Anger is going to come out to protect sad, because sad is vulnerable. Sad is quote unquote weak. Not that they actually are. So what happens is we suppress and anger comes out. And we kind of move through life then of these emotions coming up, and we just keep suppressing them. We keep suppressing the energy. And what happens is, like I said at the start of the episode, the energy stays in our body. It's just moving all around. And it's like, hello, I need to be seen here. And what happens is as well, I mentioned about when we grow up, a kind of our upbringing has a big impact on how we process emotions. But it's also to do with, things that happen to us, trauma, different experiences we go through. What happens is we feel a wound. So for example, for me, my parents split up when I was young. So that would be a wound for me from growing up. And maybe that, triggered sadness, loneliness, despair, whatever it might be. So when something that I can't control, for example, like there is conflict going on around me, and maybe it brings me back to a memory of seeing conflict in the home, that wound, it's like someone is going and, oh, I'm just going to touch that wound. I'm just going to, see that wound, I'm just going to touch that. So all of a sudden, I'm in an office and I'm in my 20s or 30s and there's people fighting around me and it's triggering my wound of, oh my God, I can't control this conflict. I can't control this. All of a sudden, I'm getting this wave of emotions. I'm getting panic. I'm getting anxiety. I'm getting uncomfortable. I'm like, oh my God. But in actual fact, that emotion didn't even start there. It started when I was maybe 4 or 5 and seeing mom and dad fight and knowing that it means they're breaking up. And that's just an example. There's many different things that can happen to us, many different ways it can show up. But what happens is we move through life and we just keep suppressing, and then that same wound is being touched, ouch, that's sore, emotions are coming up, or we have that subconscious of we have to suppress because if I show this anger, I'm a bold person or I'm a bad person. And all of these different things just pile up one on top of the other, and then all of a sudden we're walking around not actually really sure what is wrong with us, not really sure how to process our emotions, and being controlled by our emotions. And I say that with emphasis because the kicker with this is you are not your emotions. You simply aren't. Like, our emotions are energy that we feel, but you are not them. And the way I love to describe this is, if you think about yourself, and I love to use this with clients as well, if you think about yourself as the sky, you are the sky and your emotions are the weather. Some days are scorching, 27 degrees, absolutely beautiful. Some days it's lashing rain. Some days it's a thunderstorm. Some days it's cold and windy. Each day is different. The weather is different, but you are the sky and you remain the same. And I like this analogy because it kind of encourages us to separate ourselves from our emotions, knowing that our emotions, like the weather, are just passing through. They are not you. And hopefully that sits with someone who's listening today, because I know when I learned that, I was like, whoa, I really thought that I was just someone who just was snappy and like ruled by my emotions or overly emotional. I get emotional at everything. I get emotional at telly. I get emotional at books. I get emotional at seeing children laugh. And I just thought that was me. But now I know it's a way of expressing myself, but it's not who I am to my core. Who I am to my core is how I work through that, how I process that. And the beauty with that is that we can always learn, we can always change, we can always adapt new ways of navigating through certain emotions. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start with processing my emotions, it's okay. We've all been there. We're all going to continue to be there, because as long as we are alive, we're going to be experiencing different emotions. Some of the good, some of the bad, some of the ugly. And it's just about learning to navigate through that. And I'm not sitting here either saying that, you know, I am well able to say, oh, today I'm feeling angry, I'm going to go scream in a pillow. No, like I'm still very much navigating through this, but it's just having the awareness. And I think one of the biggest things for me is like, oh, I am feeling this today. Because when I say I am feeling sad, for example, it takes my identity away from it. I'm not a sad person. I'm just feeling sad. And that's different. That's different because I'm not telling myself that I'm the emotion. I'm not giving it permission to be my identity. I'm not giving it permission to control my day, my narrative, my thoughts, my actions. I'm simply acknowledging its space, giving it space to be there, and giving it permission to be worked through. And that's the important part. And you know, I talk about how, you know, I'm not going to let it control my thoughts, my actions, because they are all connected. So there is like a triangle. I think I might have mentioned it before in previous podcasts, but there's a triangle, okay? So if you think about like the bottom left corner is your thoughts. At the top is your emotions or feelings, and at the bottom right corner is your action. So you have your thought, creates an emotion or feeling, creates an action, creates more thought, creates an emotion and a feeling, creates more actions. And so it just kind of goes around this triangle. And if you think about it, you have a thought of, let's just say you spill your coffee when you're getting ready for work that morning. You have a thought, for F's sake, nothing ever goes right for me. Creates a feeling, I'm pissed off. Creates an action, slamming the door and storm into your car on the way to work. Okay, your partner's just heard you slam the door or whatever. Oh, what the hell's going on? Creates another thought of, oh, for God's sake, now I'm going to have to deal with my partner when I get home, blah, 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 giving out to me. Creates another feeling of resentment or anger or whatever it might be. Creates another action of, oh, texting your partner like, oh, I didn't mean to slam the door or whatever it is, blah, blah. So you can kind of see, I'm making up this as I go, so bear with me, but you can kind of see how they all trickle into each other. And I'm going to give you some examples of what to do in terms of how to navigate through your emotions, how to give them space, but how to not let them control the whole entire cycle of the thoughts, feelings and actions. Because that's where it shows, and that's where that kind of level of emotional intelligence is important in helping us to not let it take over or consume our entire day. So I suppose, how do we handle that? How do we navigate through those emotions? So I suppose I'll go back to the example that he used, the spilled coffee. So for example, you wake up, whatever, you spill your coffee and you're like, oh shit, like I spilled my coffee, I'm going to be late. You have to go and change your top or change your trousers, whatever it is. And where you catch it is you'll have that thought of like, for God's sake, and you'll go and you'll do it, whatever. But it's about reframing. And so just kind of trying to reframe it in that moment can be really helpful for you. You know, another thing could be if someone cuts you off in traffic, and that is frustrating. I know that. But instead of letting that kind of be like, oh my God, that person has just cut me off, like, you are not a nice person, maybe we call them names or whatever it is, reframing it. Okay, maybe they're having a really bad day, maybe they're driving to a hospital appointment, maybe they're on their way to a funeral. And that's not to like bring the vibe down, it's just to reframe it and say, okay, maybe they're having a really bad day, you know what I mean? And kind of bringing yourself back to like, okay, no. So it's like almost like catching the thoughts to reframe it. I find is a good step at the start. However, that's not always the easiest thing to do, because sometimes it's like, no, they just cut me off because they're just blah, whatever. And all of a sudden the emotion comes up and the anger is there. And something that Joe Dispenza always talks about is, okay, so when the emotion comes up, I mentioned like the sky earlier, just observe it. So by bringing your awareness to just observing the emotion, and this comes with practice, okay? Sometimes you might be sitting here listening to this and being like, oh my God, I've actually been feeling so like bored today, or I've been feeling actually quite sad today, and I'm just realizing this now as I'm listening to the podcast. Like, that's okay. Like, we do kind of go around in this mode of like autopilot, where we're not actually, the emotions are just like ticking, ticking, ticking. They're just coming up and they're controlling and they're taking over and they're influencing our thoughts and our actions and more emotions and all of that. And so it's okay if you're listening, you're like, oh my God, I don't actually really think I check in at my emotions, because believe me, I have days where I'm like, oh my God, I've not checked in with myself today. But it's just like, bring yourself back to that point in the car and be like, okay, anger is present. And Joe Dispenza says, you know, how when we become the observer of the emotion, it actually brings us out of our fight and flight, which is where the emotion can control us. And it brings us into kind of more of a state of creativity. And this is where I love to like give the emotion an outlet. So different emotions need different physical outlets. As I said, emotions are energy in motion, and energy needs an expression. So for example, that anger could literally be putting on like a really upbeat, loud song and just singing at the top of your lungs, being like, oh my God, I'm going to get all this out at you because I'm not going to let this anger control my day. I'm not going to bring it into the opposite me. Or it could be, you know, another thing for anger, oh my God, that works wonders, is screaming into a pillow. If you have not screamed into a pillow, you don't know what you're missing out on. Oh my God, most people are like, you need to go to this like really cool nightclub. I'm like, you need to scream into a pillow. It's so good. I remember the first time I did this was actually not so long ago, maybe like 2 years ago, and it was through my coaching course that I learned it. And I remember my teacher, my mentor, was taking us through, you know, how to process the emotions, and it was screaming in a pillow. And I remember I tried it and I was like, the first couple of times I did it, I was like, this feels really weird. Like, what? Like, I was just screaming into the pillow, but then it's like I opened the floodgates and all of a sudden it was like, like that pillow was hearing it, like, and I felt so like, I felt like I had just taken a deep breath, or I just felt like that kind of weight lift off of me. And I had given it an outlet. I wasn't going to go and walk around then and slam doors or slam drawers or take it out on people that it wasn't even their fault. And this is what happens. Like when we don't give the emotions, first of all, when we can't reframe it, when we don't process the emotion or observe the emotion coming up, we then go and we take it out on the world. Like, for example, if I didn't, let's say, scream in that pillow and I had that bad day and I went down to the shop and the shop was busy, or the cashier dropped my change and I'm like, oh, for God's sake, whatever, picked up my change. All of a sudden now I'm inflicting my emotion, my negative emotion, onto someone else. Maybe that's going to stir up a negative emotion for them, and then they're going to inflict it on someone else. You know what I mean? And it's like all of a sudden, it's like we're almost inflicting wounds on other people. It's like our wounds, my wound of anger for, you know, because I got cut off in traffic that day, because maybe I have a subconscious thought of, oh, because I'm not good enough to be first in line in the traffic. All of a sudden that just goes and filters all the way down. And now my wound is creating a wound onto someone else and making a cashier feel whatever way because I'm giving out because I dropped my change. By the way, I didn't do that during that year, but I'm just using this as an example. And that's how it can kind of infiltrate and manipulate and control us. And so it's about bring it back to the steps. Okay, I couldn't reframe it. I'm going to observe and process the emotion. And observing the emotion you will intuitively know what that emotion needs to, like, let's say, for example, if it's grief. And I know a lot of people, we've all experienced grief at some point in our life, whether it's losing a loved one or a pet, or, you know, going through a relationship breakup can be a form of grief. And grief is one that it looks different for everyone, and it looks different each day. And I feel like it's important to talk about this one. So maybe, you know, people listening, this might resonate with you, but it's really coming in like, I'm like, oh, I need to talk about grief right now. And I remember reading a thing before about grief, and it can apply to like other emotions in terms of wounds. Like, it's not that the grief gets smaller or that it goes away. It's that through life, you know, as we kind of process and work through it, we're able to grow around it. So if you see the grief as like, let's say the size of an orange, and you know, doing your mindfulness, going to therapy, processing the emotion, acknowledging the emotion, having your bad days, having your days in bed, going out with friends, talking about happy memories. All of a sudden, all these leaves and these trees start to grow around this orange. And this orange, which is the grief, is on this tree of everything else that has grown around it that you have allowed yourself to grow and to learn throughout this grief. So although the grief is still there and the wound is still there, you have expanded and you have this new kind of awareness of how to navigate it while still acknowledging that it's there. So yeah, I just felt like kind of giving that example there, because grief is one of those emotions that we will all feel, and it is one of the heavier emotions to carry as well. And so being patient with yourself too, to not like demand the answer from yourself. Like, what does this emotion need? I don't know. Like, what does it need? And sometimes some emotions need to talk. Some emotions want to be heard, and whether that's with a friend or a therapist or a coach or a healer or a partner, some emotions need to talk. And that's important, because that's the unpacking of the energy. That's the unpacking of the wound. And so bringing, allowing yourself to kind of be like, okay, what does this emotion need? And it's the same for the good emotions too, like love. Maybe like for me, I know my love needs a verbal expression. Like, I'm like, I love you so much, or you're so beautiful, or the best thing that ever happened to me, whatever it is. It's like my love needs an expression, or maybe it's a physical one of a hug or a kiss or a holding of hands, or excitement. Kids, when they get excited, what are they doing? They're jumping up and down, they're stomping their feet, they're clapping their hands. And it's the same with us, even look at like a football match. A bunch of men watching a football match and they score. And what are they doing? They're patting each other on the back, they're hugging, they're swinging at each other. And it's like that emotion is being expressed, and it's so beautiful and it's great. But it's also like, why is it okay for that emotion to be expressed? But if someone is like feeling sad or something, it's like we're kind of made feel like we have to do that in private or not do it at all and just suppress the emotion. And it's kind of like, when you think about it that way, it's kind of like, not that it's sad, but it's kind of like a whoa moment of like, these are all just emotions. And, I'm going to get a bit woo-woo here for a minute, so tinfoil hats on. But it's kind of like, it brings you into like the whole, like the purpose of emotions. All of the emotions that we feel are part of our human experience. And you guys know, I believe that we come here for a human experience, to learn, to evolve and to grow, to learn lessons. And also one of those lessons, one of those learnings is to just experience human emotions, is to just go through the waves of life, the ebbs and flows, the ups and the downs, the lefts and the right. Because that's a privilege. It's a privilege to be alive. Like, what's the chances of us even being born? I don't even know what it is, but you're a winner. We're all the sperm that won, okay? But, it is a privilege to be alive. And part of that privilege is to feel emotions. And although some of them are uncomfortable, it also teaches us that we can't have the good without the bad. You can't have the light without the dark. You can't have, the yin without the yang. I was thinking of another example there. And so if you are someone who feels like you've had your fair share of negative emotions, what I will say to you is, the universe, there is a lot of polarity. So what goes up must come down. There has to be a give and take. And so what I will say to you is, it does also mean that you can feel the happier, the joy, the love, the excitement, those emotions as deeply as you may have felt of some of the more painful ones. And the deeper you can feel your emotions, speaking as someone who is a deep feeler, I am someone who is such a deep feeler. Like I really do feel things quite strongly. And it's a blessing and a curse. And look, I don't even want to say it's a curse, because I really think it's a blessing. I've gone through things in my life where I have really felt like I don't, like this pain is too much, or this ache is too much, or this whatever it might be. And they've been my own wounds, and they have been things that I've had to unpack. And some of those things, I might record a podcast on. But I've known through those times, I've had my tools to get through from it. Some more tools, I've had my reframing that I talked about. I've had my observing the emotion. There's some others that I want to talk about as well. But I have had those tools to help me sit with those emotions and be in those emotions. But it's also feeling those emotions so deeply. I have felt it on the other end. Like, I have felt love like I never thought possible. I have felt happiness and gratitude and joy much, much more deeper, because I know that I'm a deep feeler. And so we can kind of, some people can kind of choose to go through life for like, almost like with this kind of like glass, or this kind of cover up to like this numbness of like, I'm not going to feel these emotions. But it's kind of like a catch-22, because if you're not really letting yourself feel your emotions because you don't want to feel the bad ones, well, you're not really going to feel the good ones as deeply as you could, because you haven't felt the bad ones as deeply as you could. It's like I said, it's the give and take, it's the yin and the yang. We have to go on both ends, and we have to kind of flow through both, because that's life, and that's human, that's being human, and it is a privilege. And so, yeah, I feel like I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I just felt like that was important to say, that the deeper you feel certain emotions, the deeper the lessons, the deeper the resilience, the deeper the learning you will take from it. And the deeper you can feel the good emotions too. And as well, just to know here, like, we avoid doing certain things in our life because of the emotion that we're going to feel. So it's not actually the thing that we're afraid of, it's the emotion it's going to invoke. So it kind of brings you back to the point of like, our emotions control our life unless you learn how to control them. And in turn, that's another way they can control our life, because you'll avoid certain things because you don't want to feel the emotion of it's going to invoke. So for example, if you're in a relationship that you know needs to end, you know you need to break up with someone, but you're not doing it and you're putting it off. Why are you putting it off? Because you're going to feel guilt. You're going to feel maybe shame. You're going to feel heartache. You're going to feel sad. So you're avoiding doing certain things because you don't want to feel the emotions. And I'm not trying to belittle these emotions at all, but I'm just trying to give you a bit of a wider perspective here, that they are just emotions. Emotions that you can work through, and emotions that can pass. They're energy in motion that will just need you to sit with them, acknowledge them, reframe them, observe them, maybe talk about them, whatever it is that those emotions need. And once you do that, you can get through it. So why would we put off certain things just because we don't want to feel the emotion that it's going to bring? You know what I mean? It's like learning how to manage your emotions can ultimately help you learn how to manage your life, because you will be able to make decisions that maybe are difficult for you. You'll be able to walk away from certain things that do not serve you or are not for you anymore. You'll be in a place in your life where you're not avoiding doing certain things because of the emotion it's going to feel, even though you probably already feel that emotion anyways. But that's like a whole, God, I could sit here and talk about this for hours, but that's just like a whole other thing, you know? But I just think that's really interesting, that we avoid certain things because of how it makes us feel. And that's just part of being human, guys. But another thing that I wanted to talk about as well is, probably should talk about at the start of the episode, but it's where kind of our emotional regulation is. So, I talked about how like our emotions are dropped into our body from the brain. Where the emotional regulation, or kind of the regulation that takes place, happens is in the prefrontal cortex. Now, I'm no scientist, so if anyone would like to clarify in the comments, please do. But my understanding is that our emotional regulation, our decision making, our clarity, our focus is all in our prefrontal cortex. And what happens is, when we're feeling emotions, we're not processing them, we're not emotionally regulating ourselves. The emotions are going around our body, they're controlling our day, they're making us act out, we're taking it out on people, we're not sure how to communicate or navigate this emotion. And so another tool that I love to incorporate into managing your emotions is mindfulness. And mindfulness is something I've given masterclasses and talks on it before. I'm very passionate about it. It's something that has really helped in my own life. And even like in the terms of anxiety, that prefrontal cortex is going to help us with emotional regulation, and mindfulness activates in our prefrontal cortex. So when you are working with the prefrontal cortex in a state of mindfulness, emotional regulation, improving decision making, problem solving, all of that, You're building your resilience to cope when things do happen in life, when there is a trigger or something does poke that wound, and all of a sudden you're being brought into this emotion. You have that tool of mindfulness there. And sometimes, you know, we can go to mindfulness and we can start off at the bottom and it can help a little bit, but it's like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it gets. And that is such an important tool, I find, with helping with emotional regulation, helping with emotional intelligence. And so mindfulness can look like many things. It can look like meditation, grounding. I love to do tactile mindfulness. That's like actually like physically giving the energy a release. Through, I hold a crystal, I might rub a crystal. Anyone who's been to my workshops will know I worked with seashells. Giving that giving that emotion a physical outlet is really actually one of the big things that comes up for me. But meditation too, oh my God, the power of meditation. I know Joe Dispenza talks about this a lot in terms of your emotions as well. Meditation, you know, if you find it hard as someone to be an observer of your emotions, if you're really, really just very attached to your emotions, meditation can really help you bring you into a state of observing, because that's what you're doing in meditation. You're just observing and you're focusing on one thing. And different types of meditation, you know, it can be lying down and chanting. It can be breath work. Breath work is so good for emotional regulation too. So many different forms of mindfulness. Like mindfulness can literally be making your cup of tea, and as you're putting the tea bag in, you're pouring the hot water in. You know, ask yourself now, have you made a cup of tea today or within the last couple of days? What were you thinking about when you made your cup of tea? I guarantee you can't tell me. You're probably thinking about what you're going to do for dinner, or geez, I need to text that person back, or I can't believe they said that last week, or oh, you know, I need to put that wash on, and blah, blah. Our mind is just like ticking all the time. And so we have on average like 70,000 thoughts per day. But the beautiful thing with this is the brain can only think one thing at a time. It gets kind of mad when you think about it. So bring yourself back to that cup of tea, practicing your mindfulness. Okay, I'm putting the tea bag in. Watch the tea bag drop in. Watch yourself pour the hot water in. See the steam come out. Notice it. Pour the milk in. Stir the tea with your spoon. You're probably like, oh my God, she's telling us how to make a cup of tea. But I'm trying to bring you into like how to be present with it. Being present with making your tea, holding the tea in your hand, feeling the heat of the cup, taking your first sip, feeling the sip go into you and be like, this is grounding. What you might notice is, I've been feeling really erratic today, or I have this anxiety on my chest actually. And all of a sudden that emotion that's been there all day sitting with you and has actually been infiltrating your thoughts and your actions now has space to come up, because you've given yourself a few minutes to be present with it. And, you know, it's true what they say, the only thing we really have is this present moment. And I'm grateful to be with you in this present moment, by the way. And it's kind of funny to me how I'm recording this now, but people will be listening to this in the future. But all we have is this now moment. It's all that exists. The past is gone. The future is unwritten. All we have is our now moment. So honor yourself today and take a few moments to be mindful. Again, it doesn't have to be meditation. It could be just sitting where you are now, noticing what's around you, looking at the trees blowing, or noticing the traffic going by, you know, tuning into the sounds, the feeling of your clothes on your body, whatever it might be. Mindfulness is so helpful in helping us with emotional regulation. And I really wanted to touch on that today because it's something that as I said, I'm very passionate about. And so, yeah, we've got our reframing, we've got our observing the emotion, and you've got your mindfulness. And I promise you, mindfulness, as I said, can look different in many different ways. But working on that and bringing that tool into your life will help you with that emotional regulation. And like I said, it's a muscle. It gets stronger each time you practice it. So, yeah, I think with that mindfulness too, I do actually just want to emphasize breath work. Taking deep breaths is emotional regulation. Okay, we are allowed to soothe ourselves. If you think about the start of this episode, I talked to when we were kids and we were having a meltdown, and our parents, grandparents, siblings, aunties, uncles were just like, stop acting out, calm down. And we weren't regulated or soothed in the way that we need to be. And that's okay. Okay, we're not going to hold any resentment or grudges on that, because that's okay. We can accept that. But you deserve to learn how to soothe and regulate yourself now. You as an adult listening to this, it's okay if you don't know how to regulate or soothe yourself. I didn't. a couple of years ago. I didn't. And now I do. And something like literally putting your hand in your chest and taking deep breaths, reframing the thoughts that are coming in, observing the emotion, practicing your mindfulness of just deep breathing, being present, meditating, observing. You deserve that. You deserve to give yourself that, because as I said, you don't need to be ruled by your emotions. You simply need to learn how to become the observer and learn how to manage them. And you know, something that Gabor Mate says, and I think it's a lovely thing to kind of end on this note, is that your emotions or your feelings are not problems to be solved. They are experiences to be felt. It is part of your experience, okay? It is part of life. It is part of this journey. And unfortunately, some parts of that journey means feeling those uncomfortable emotions. But don't avoid certain things or put off certain things because of the emotion it's going to invoke, because you can manage and work through it. And I hope that, you know, listening to this episode might give you some tips or tricks on how to do that. Or if anyone wants to reach out to me and talk about this a bit further, I would love to chat to you on how to, you know, navigate through certain emotions. And reminding yourself that that means the good emotions too. You know, you get to experience excitement, joy, happiness. I know I keep listing the same ones over and over. I need to get my emotions wheel out again and remind myself of all the emotions, because there's many. I'll actually post it on Instagram as I post this episode. So yeah. Just learn to ride the wave of the emotions and don't resist them. I promise you, it's easier and you're stronger than you think. You are not your emotions. You are the sky. Let the clouds pass. You have got this. So now we have our Cosmic Confession segment, which I love. And by the way, you guys can write into me if it's something that you need advice on, if it's a dilemma or a question that you have, please write in. I'd love to hear from you. And no, I am no, you know, I'm not God. I don't have all the answers, but maybe I can give you a new perspective or something that maybe you haven't thought about. And just some comfort or resonance in knowing that you're not alone in whatever it is you're going through. Before this week's Cosmic Confession, a listener wrote in and they said, I lately have been comparing myself to everyone on social media and it's left me feeling jealous and resentment. I know it's not real life, but I'm not really sure how to get out of that loop. Any advice, lol? Okay. Comparing yourself on social media and not feeling jealous and resentment. Okay, I'm going to put my hands up and say I honestly relate to you. And it kind of is bringing that quote to my mind: someone else's light does not dim your sparkle. And I feel like I want to say that to that person and maybe anyone else who is listening who maybe resonates. You know, we talked a lot about emotions in this podcast, and the first thing is just to acknowledge that. Just acknowledge that it's coming up. I feel jealous. I feel resentful. I feel almost like, oh, that person can't do that or can't do well in that because that means that I'm not doing well or I'm not good enough, even though that's not what it means. So the first thing is to just acknowledge it. And without shame, without guilt, don't judge yourself. So often we go into this state of kind of judgment with, oh my God, why am I feeling that way? Why am I thinking that about that person? They're such a lovely person. Why do I feel jealous of them? Don't judge yourself. Just have acceptance around it and have kind of a more loving compassion. Have compassion for yourself is what I should say. Having compassion with that is really important, and just sitting with it. And like I said, someone else's light doesn't dim your sparkle. And I think often it can kind of come back to this kind of lack mentality of like, there's not enough for everyone. So if one person gets a promotion in work, it means that no one else can. Or if one person is being admired for something that they did so well, you know, it means that you can't. And it kind of brings us back to like, there's not space for us all, or there's not enough for us all, or that there's not enough praise or love or admiration or acceptance or abundance for us all. And that is an illusion. Okay, that is a myth. So, you know, reminding yourself there is enough for everyone and everyone is unique. And the reason I'm saying that is all of our destinations, or where we're all going, or all of our paths are all uniquely different. And so what I will say to you is you can't really compare where someone else is at to yourself, because not only is that somewhere that you can't go because it's their path and it's their life, but you also don't know what led them there. And it kind of reminds me of like, social media is not real. And this is something that we all know. And I think it has kind of gotten more like people are more opening up to like, you know, the things that they go through, being more raw and real and authentic online, which I really appreciate that. And I love to follow people like that. They show that it's not all like roses and whatever all the time, roses and flowers all the time. But there is a lot more realness. However, there still is that element of, it's a highlight reel. It's the best of, and it's hard to kind of fall in that, like, oh my God, this person looks like they're doing so well, or they've got it all, or they're so successful, or whatever it might be. So reminding yourself that, first of all, comparison is a thief of joy. It really is. You can't compare yourself out of your own joy. You're comparing yourself to a highlight reel. You're also comparing yourself to someone else's story, someone else's journey, which, like I said, it's never going to look like that for you, because you're different people. You have different paths. So yeah, acknowledging it, becoming aware of it. Don't judge yourself. Have compassion for yourself, and remembering that, like, that is their path and it's different to yours. And if you feel like you haven't had that kind of wow or acknowledgement moment or promotion or acceptance or whatever it might be, trusting that it will come, trusting in your own path, and just becoming, more present and showing yourself some love. I feel like as well, the jealousy or the resentment, it might just be a part of you that wants to be seen. Maybe there's a part of you and your authenticity that you haven't been expressing because of subconscious beliefs, fears. And so you've suppressed that. And then when you see someone else who is expressing that, who is comfortable with expressing that part of himself, you feel jealous, you feel resentment. And that's actually quite normal. So not only is it something that you can acknowledge, show compassion for, but you can also say, what part of me is yearning to be expressed? What part of me wants to feel seen? And remembering that it's all information, feeling these certain emotions. And I know I talked about emotions a lot in this episode, but feeling these emotions, it all just is information. And it's a learning and it's a lesson. So don't be hard on yourself. But thank you for sharing that. It was a really interesting one. And I think it's something that, again, we can all relate to, especially in the industry that I'm in. I'm on Instagram, I'm a coach, I'm doing my spiritual things. And sometimes I have fallen into a trap of like, oh my God, am I doing enough? But thankfully, I have these tools that are bringing me out, and I'm like, no, I am on my own path. I am on time, and I'm doing okay. Like, I'm going to be fine. And you are too. So I hope that these little tools might help you. And just focus on your own light, focusing on shining your light as bright as you can. And like I said, it will not dim anyone else's sparkle. And if someone else feels dim because of your sparkle, that's a them problem. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but it is. That's their problem. Next, or I should say last but not least, is our affirmation of the week. I love this. I love our affirmations. I just feel like affirmations come back to everything, and affirmations are actually really, really helpful I mentioned in this episode with emotions, reframing the thoughts that are coming in. Affirmations could be a really good way of reframing that thought. If something's triggering you, reframing it to a more positive, personal thought, like an affirmation. Positive, personal, and present tense. That's what an affirmation is. Anyways, I'm going to pull one now. Okay, so this one was at the top, and I actually love this one. I know I said that about them all. I love them all because they're mine. Everything I need is within me. Everything I need is within me. It's so true. The emotional regulation, the acceptance, being seen, being heard, being validated, the love, the reassurance, the support, the guidance, everything that you seek outside of you is within you. It's deep. I know it's deep. And on this podcast, my slogan for the Cosmic Coach is discover the universe within. And on Cosmic Conversations, we discuss the universe within. And part of that is everything that you need. Everything I need is within me. And it's so true. And so often it's almost like we're taught, or we're kind of made believe or go around like everything I need is outside of me. I need these body creams. I need this makeup. I need this validation from these people. I need my friends to tell me how great I am. You don't need these things. Everything that you need is within you. And it's deep, guys, but it's so true. So maybe asking yourself, what is it that you need today? And reminding yourself, well, actually, I have that within me. Because you do. So I hope that affirmation can go into your week with you and give you some clarity and some comfort in knowing that you are all you need. Thank you for tuning into Cosmic Conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, then please let me know. Maybe consider leaving a 5-star review or a comment on what you thought. I'd love to hear suggestions and feedback on any topics you'd like me to explore or unpack, or maybe a guest that you'd like me to have on so I can pick their brain. If you have a cosmic confession or a dilemma that you'd like me to explore next week, then please send it my way on Instagram at cosmicconversationspod or email thecosmiccoach.ie@gmail.com. Thank you and see you next week.